What's up, friends? Today we're going to be taking a look at the Meepo MLR. This is Meepo's very first, and in fact I think China's very first official race board. This thing is quite interesting and I have a lot to say about it, so make sure you stay tuned through the very end to see where I ride this particular one for the first time. Now, some of you may notice that you're a little bit further back than normal, and that is because the Meepo MLR is massive. It is actually one of the longest boards that I have in my arsenal right now, and it's pretty much the same length as an actual Stooge Raceboard. And I'm not exactly sure what the reasoning is for making the standing platform so long on a racing board, but I think it does help with the higher speed stability in a way, making the wheelbase longer. But at the same time, usually when you think long wheelbase, you think, well, isn't that going to mean that it doesn't turn very well? Well, that's just not quite true, because this board has 3 links, and 3-link trucks have been around for quite a while. The Stooge Raceboards company has been selling their version of 3 links for a very long time. These ones are sort of a collaboration between Meepo and Stooge. They've been working on these for a while, and they offer the same sort of characteristics with slightly different performance than the normal 3 links that you would see on, for example, my race board or on the Stooge V5 race chassis. Again, different from the 3 links that are on the V6 chassis and the ones that are on the old V4 chassis. They've changed a little bit over the years, but use the same basic concept. That concept is using a Heimbolt, which I'll show some B-roll of. It's basically this big spherical bearing with bushings on it, and then a angular mounted surface, or on regular 3 links it's vertical, and on the V5 is horizontal. You use that to control the movement of the axle, which is a solid axle. It goes all the way through in all of the directions. So you basically have a center pivot point, and the wheels can pivot in all directions around that point. From there, you take 2 links and you fasten a link to the axle on each side and then a link to the base plate on each side. What that gives you is a triangular shape of motion restriction. And if you look at the linkages and how that works out, while you push the wheels up and down, you can see that using those links you can restrict the movement of the left, right, and up, down to a different range than it would be if it was just a Heim joint flopping around in the wind. Obviously that's not going to be very useful to anyone. So on regular 3 links you can adjust the length of those links. You can adjust the length on here a little bit. I believe that's really just for tuning purposes though, and you probably won't need to mess with that at all on a board like this one. Now on this board there's sort of a lot of production board firsts, and one of those is the 16S battery. I don't believe that there is any other company out there selling a board with the 16S battery specifically. We now have the X-Way/MBS collab that's an 18S mountain board. We also have Ace-Deck with 14S boards, and we also have SkyArt Power with 18S boards. And I don't think that anyone else has done 16S yet. So interesting choice. Inside here we have a 16S 2P battery on my unit of P45B cells. However, during testing in the last year or so, myself and other riders expressed concerns about voltage sag and sort of longevity of these packs at 2P, and they've now upgraded to 3P. Why mine is a 2P, I'm not exactly sure. I guess I got an old one. Hopefully everything else is the same, but maybe they're just pawning off the old batteries on reviewers, but oh well. It just means I'll have less time on it at the track. So we got that 16S 2P battery in there, and again, another first for the Chinese industry is using P45B in a pack. This is a very good, high quality power cell from Molicel. Offers a lot of discharge performance at 4,500-ish milliamp hours per cell. So you end up with a 518 watt hour pack here in the 2P version, and then about a 700 watt hour pack in the 3P version. So right here, you've got a metal battery case with plastic end caps, and I'll put in a clip right now of me opening this up and looking at the battery. Time to take a look inside. So we're gonna take off the enclosure. I'm not sure if you have to take off this rear cable cover or not, but we're about to find out. All right, we got all the screws out, and if you ever lose one somehow, they appear to be 25 millimeter long, countersunk 1032 screws with a M3 head that are apparently Meepo branded. Very interesting. Strange to see English fasteners on here, but oh well. Let's see if this will just pop off. I'm not really sure what to expect here. Oh, okay, it can slide. Will it come up though? Okay. Seems like there is a chance that we need to take this off in order to flip over and see inside. Or I can just lift it up and see if I can see anything interesting inside. Nothing very interesting. Just a battery and heat shrink, which is a 16S with P45B. It does not say how many parallel groups though. I was hoping that it would say 16S 3P because this used to be a 16S 2P. In any case, the enclosure is full all the way up to here. No room for a custom battery, full all the way to the back as well. Standard voltage 57, capacity 518.4 watt hours. So I guess we can calculate the P groups off of that. Dimensions 25 in height, 145 in width, and 460 millimeters length. So if you're looking to put a different battery in, that is the length that you would need to fit in order to use this enclosure. I'm not really going to show you guys inside because there's literally nothing interesting. It's just a battery in a case. The case is made out of metal, which is nice, with plastic end caps. So should be pretty strong, but this is a race board, so you shouldn't really be going off-road or anything crazy like that with it, but there you go. Not the most interesting thing, so like I said in that clip, I'm not really going to show you the inside. It's literally just a battery sitting in there with some foam. You've got a rear exit for the cables here that is protected with metal, and then you've got your ESC up here, which I will also show a clip right now of me opening that up to check it out. Alrighty, so inside this box we have the Monsoon ESC, which is 100% potted, except for the ginormous capacitors that are sitting right here. These are 80 volt, 1500 microfarad, pretty large for an ESC, but hopefully that'll help with consistent power and reliable performance. We've got MR60s. They look like to be official ones from Amass, which is great. And we have nice 12 gauge phase wires, which appear to be high quality bendable silicone wire rather than the hard stuff that we used to see on a lot of the older boards. In the rear here you do have the cable gland entrance. I certainly would not call this enclosure water resistant in any real way. ESC is potted, but of course the connections are not necessarily waterproof, especially the sensor wires. However, you should never be riding this in the rain or any wetness for that matter anyway. On top we have our power button and then a small plastic window for the antenna to go out of. One of my friends did report that his antenna was caught in a bad spot in the case, so Might be worth checking yours before you go riding. That ESC back there is pretty interesting. It's got huge capacitors on it and should offer a lot of power. It is the JKESC 60B or something like that. It has some model name. I'll put it on screen, but it says on their website that it is a 90 amp ESC. As we are all pretty aware, usually the amp rating for these ESCs is the motor amps, sorry. So that's about 45 amps per motor, which seems like not that much, but this does have a little more kick than you would expect. I'm very, very stoked to figure out how this performs in comparison to the N3, because that is also a higher voltage board with a higher amp ESC. So I'll be really interested to see how that works out. But JKESC is something that's not used in a ton of boards, but I think they're making a little bit of a rise with the newer, higher powered boards. Over here at the back of the board, we've got a gear drive system, as well as the 3-link truck, which you can see a little bit better here. Of course, I'll show B-roll during this video of the trucks and whatnot, but the motors back here are huge. I believe these are 6890 motors, what's it called? DKW? I don't know why I can't remember that right now, but they are a common, DXW. They're a commonly used motor in the Chinese board industry. Pretty beefy. Time will tell, of course, if these are reliable or not, but I don't think anyone on the MLRs so far has had motor issues. In any case, they're huge, overbuilt to be able to withstand the higher amps and the higher temperature that they're going to have to put up with under like max load on every single turn. So good to see some nice beefy motors on here. They do seem to have quality phase wires, which is an interesting thing to point out, but I think it's something worth mentioning. We also have these gear drives back here, which are sort of a collab with Lin Power. If you guys aren't aware, Lin Power has worked with Meepo on a number of things, including these tires. And these gear drives are a 4-gear drive system, which is sort of similar to the one that Newbie has. Newbie did it first, and then Lin Power sort of has their own version of this 4-gear drive system. They use the straight cut gears. I believe this is still a plastic motor or plastic wheel pulley pinion in here, and I think that's supposed to get upgraded to metal on the full production version. I thought I was getting a full production version, but when we open up the gear drive later, we'll see if it actually has metal in it or not. Eventually, I think the goal is for that to be metal, but we'll see. If not, the plastic has worked pretty well so far. Again, this is not supposed to be an off-road board or anything that's going to be taking a ton of impact. It just needs to be able to handle the loads of racing. The gear drives are fastened onto the 3-link back here with some pretty decent looking shaft collars. These seem to be a lot stronger and better than the way that I have attached my gear drives to my 3-links on my raceboard. It'd be nice if I had some adapters like this, because these seem like they'll hold their place a lot better and won't have issues slipping. So, pretty interesting drive system back here. These also do have the impact reduction TPU spiders that go in between the wheel and the gear. So you should have a pretty good performance out of these drives back here. One of the other major features on this board is the deck. This is a double drop down deck that brings the standing level, which is like here, down to almost in line with the axles. It's basically like tiny bit above the axles, and what that gives you is an interesting sort of pendulum feeling when you are on these trucks, and it helps you be a little more stable through turns, helps you dig in, and helps you corner much better than you could without that. This deck is very comfortable. I've stood on it a couple times, and I've done a couple laps on one of the Stooge riders MLR at one of our practices, but really well done on the deck. I do think the deck is what adds a ton of weight to this board. I think this is mostly carbon fiber. I don't think there's any core in here at all. I think it's just solid carbon fiber, and that ends up with a really heavy deck. I will correct that if it is not, but I don't think that the rest of the components here are particularly heavy. But this whole board adds up to 44 pounds, so you're really lugging something around when you take this to practice. That weight does help in a way, I think, for absorbing bumps on the track, makes it a little bit less squirrely. But in any case, I really like this deck. It's super long, lots of standing platform, and it has a little rear foot area that you can like brace your foot against, which helps a lot when you're doing these intense turns. I'll just show you right now. There's a ledge here. Some of the pre-production units actually had a big ramp that went up here, but this one does not. There's also screws on here, which I'm not really a huge fan of. I'm kind of confused why they used socket head screws here instead of countersunk ones. If I find them annoying, I'll probably just change them out to a countersunk screw, but really great bracing back there for the massive amount of power that this thing is able to put out. Another thing of note here is that we have a top mount ESC here, and this is something that you're going to see more often on those sort of mountain boards, but for this board, I guess they didn't want to have the space in the ESC or in the battery box taken up by the ESC, so they went ahead and stuck it on top. This has a lot of heat sinking capability. I'm going to boost the exposure way up here so you can see the grates, but some people may not like the look of this on top. I think it looks fine on this particular board. I'm not usually a fan of top mounts on slim line boards, but hey, this is how they did it. I don't think that this would be very compatible with a VESC swap. I think that the space is just too small, and I'm not exactly sure how the ESC is fastened in here. I'm assuming it's just screwed in, but probably not the most compatible with a VESC swap. However, you could easily print your own enclosure here because the wires come out through the bottom and the charge port is also on here. So everything is here available for you to mod it yourself. I might even consider designing a mod enclosure for this so you could do a VESC instead of the JKESC. Last thing here before we go take it for a ride, we got the J6S remote here. Decently comfortable in the hand. I'm not 100% convinced on it yet, but we'll see how I feel about it when I ride with it. The thumb wheel, it feels very plasticky, but it feels solid enough. The remote also does feel pretty cheap, but you know, it seems to be a little bit better than some of the other Meepo ESC's remotes that I have. Of course, a lot of those remotes were from the previous Lingy or Hobbywing ESCs, so this one is a little bit different. The interface on the screen is decent enough. I do believe this has safe mode though, where you have to ride 10 kilometers before you can unlock the higher modes. I sort of get it, but also it's really annoying, and I don't think that this board has an app to change that. So I'm probably just going to turn this over on my desk and let it run 10 kilometers with the throttle pinned or something like that. Really the only way to get around that without having to ride at a tremendously slow speed on the track for 10 kilometers. Now, I don't really think there's any other major things that I want to talk about here before we go ride, so I'm just going to go ahead and take this out on a ride. We are going to go on my standard testing route. We'll see how this performs on the street, and yeah, I will be recording a little bit of footage of this at practice and maybe get some people's opinions on it. We'll see, depends on what I have time for, but my goal here is to actually do some laps on this with Draggy and compare that directly to my performance on my own race board. Then we can sort of see how this stacks up, see how far behind it is, and that'll probably give me a good idea of any improvements that I might be able to suggest. One thing right off the rip is that this board has the Meepo version of these Cyclone tires, and I believe, yeah, on this configuration right now they are tubeless. I would run these at a pretty low PSI personally, probably around 15 in the front and then maybe 18 in the back. I have another set of tubeless wheels that I was using on my DIY race board for a long time before I upgraded to the Lin Power slicks, and this is what these tires look like after they are worn out. They went through the gauntlet on my board, and I do think the Lin Power ones offer a lot more grip, but these are more of an everyday tire, and they definitely last way longer, so you sort of have some trade-offs there. But these wheels are directly compatible with the Lin Power tires, and it's a pretty easy upgrade. They are difficult to get off though because they're tubeless, so you have to have a really good seal. But I think I have a separate set that will fit straight on here, so I'm just going to swap them on and see how they perform. So let's go ahead and go on our first ride on the testing route.
Alright, so I was going to ride this on the standardized route, but I ended up having to do the stupid thing where you run the gauge up to 10 kilometers, and I didn't have time to ride the day that I wanted to. So the first day that I rode this ended up being at track day, and that's where I'm going to be showing you throughout these next set of clips. And this first lap or two here, I was really just getting a feel for what the board felt like out of the box, and so I'm pretty much just gonna cruise around here, do some weird little movements, try and feel what's going on. And my initial first impressions here are that it feels like absolute garbage. I don't know what is going on at this point at all. I just knew that it felt like a wet noodle and that there was absolutely zero return to center. So I was just riding around in E mode here, so it wasn't like dangerous or anything at this point. But if I were to be riding a lot faster, I would have felt the sloppiness and the flopping from side to side to a much higher degree. So it was good that I started in the E mode because it allowed me to figure out what was going on with the board and make adjustments accordingly. So when we come back in the next clip, I will talk about that.
Followed by Jack.
Alright, so I did a few laps on the MLR in E mode. I was able to pretty much max it out the entire track, but the stock settings for the bushings and the links are way too loose. You just flop over from side to side and there's no return to center. So I'm gonna adjust this a bit. Conveniently at this practice, Mo is actually here from Stooge Raceboard, so I'll probably talk to him about it and get her tuned up so I can hit the track in S and S Plus mode. Alright, so I was down here adjusting my bushing tightness, and I noticed that the hind bolt was just there. So when you get your MLR, make sure you go here, take the included wrench, and tighten this up real good, because if you don't, you're going to have a rude awakening when you're flopping around on the track. Alright, so we got the bushings tightened up a little bit. The hind joints are how they're supposed to be now, which is tight. The radius rods were also loose, so I tightened those up. Now we're going to jump into S Plus mode and hit some more laps and see how it goes.
I was on level 3 the whole time. I could go up another level. It grips even more.
There we go.
Alright, so as you can probably tell, I'm going quite a bit faster here in these laps. I was feeling a lot more confident, and it felt like it was almost there, but there's still something wrong with it. I couldn't figure out exactly what it was. So I went back in to try and figure it out and had a quick tune-up with Mo, and we checked over all the bolts, and this is what happened.
Alright, so I just did a once over with Mo, and everything on here was loose. So these bolts on the links, these are supposed to be tight so that the lock washer is flat on both sides. They were completely loose. The hind bolt was loose, like I said. The bolts on the back side of the links were loose. The nuts on the links were loose. The holders for the links were loose. And the same thing on the back. So all of this was loose. Everything had to be tightened. So when you get your board, make sure you tighten everything. Otherwise, it's going to feel like a wet noodle on the track, and you may have some major issues. For sure, make sure that this is tight. Otherwise, it's going to be a bad time.
After getting a little bit more comfortable on it, I started to get up to higher speeds on the Monsoon. And while the times I pulled out in this set of laps is not the best that it's capable of by far, it's definitely the best that I was able to get to that day. And I think that with some more practice, I'll be able to get these times down even more. So, as you can see, I have gotten a lot more comfortable on the turns, leaning in the correct amount and not overturning. One of the issues I had on this was the steering response is a little different than my raceboard because of this standing platform height. So I was overturning on this one a lot, which led to me getting slower times. You can see there, I only got up to about 25 on that straight, but the max in this run, I think, is in the third lap, where I hit about 28 miles an hour. Pretty far off from the maximum speed of this board, but I know for sure that I can hit the max speed on this board pretty easily, but I just need a little bit more time to figure it out. So next time I have a track day, I will probably try to hit that top speed and get down some faster times than I did on this very first day. I don't really have too many other comments on the performance at this time. It is a very stable board. Once you have everything properly tightened, it feels very similar to a Stooge V5. Very different from a DIY. Of course, you need to get used to the ESC response and the steering response. The tires that come on at stock are pretty good. I think the air pressure can probably go down a little bit from the way they're shipped. But overall, pretty great package and a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys do enjoy this video, and I will be making more content with the MLR soon. So make sure you get subscribed and stay tuned for that. I thought I would go ahead and drop this in here for the end of the video. This is the same track, same laps on my own raceboard. This track was extremely small and technical, which is why you see such a similarity in times here. I barely hit 30 on this board, and I was just getting back on it for the first time after having some cutouts previously. So I was taking it a little bit easy, but it was surprising to me that I was within a couple seconds of the lap time on the MLR. Only about 2.5 seconds off on my best time. It wasn't in this particular recording, but I got a 35.99 on one of my laps, which was pretty decent, but I started getting tired towards the end of this session, so I had to cut it off. But enjoy the rest of this footage, and stay safe, keep on riding, and peace out.